Hello and welcome to Quickies with Angela and Katie.
I'm Angela Dawn of Authentic Heart Coaching. I'm a tantric sex coach and I help couples get closer.
And I'm Katie Wilkinson of Katie Coaches. I'm a sex, love, and relationship coach on a mission to help women and our partners create a better world through women's pleasure. Last week, we started a conversation that turned into our first two-part episode of Quickies, and today we are going to come to a conclusion.
I knew you were going to have to make that joke.
You know I love a good pun.
So, if you just stumbled onto this episode and you haven't listened to last week's episode, do yourself a favor and do that first, because this is part two.
So last week we ended with the idea that condoms are where it's at in terms of birth control. Go condoms!
You
Definitely my
got
favorite.
it.
But there is this pervasive idea that cis men hate condoms. So let's get into that next. And have been
Mm-hmm.
told throughout their lives, whether it's true or not, that condom sex doesn't feel as good as sex without a condom. And because of this, many men pressure women and partners to have sex that's unprotected all the time. This is bad, obviously. So a lot of women don't feel safe refusing to have sex with a man who isn't going to wear a condom. Like maybe she consents to the sex, but she's like, oh, if he's not going to wear a condom, I don't want to have it. I don't feel safe. I'm not going to enjoy this, right? She might not feel safe asking him to wear one. Men are strong physically. A lot of women are survivors of male violence, coercion, sexual abuse, sexual grooming. Depending on what she's experienced in the past, she might be extremely cautious about potentially upsetting her. Like this might become a risk for her own safety. So that's one reason that some women don't feel comfortable asking their partner to wear a condom, even when they want him to wear one. I think you'd have a really hard time in general finding any woman who hasn't experienced some form of sexual violence from a man, or if she hasn't personally, in that rare instance, she knows women who have experienced sexual violence from men. This is a very, very real, huge, pervasive problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think almost every woman, if she's honest with herself, has experienced sexual violence. And on that somber note, let's talk about how different sex with a condom is versus sex without a condom for men. Like, how different is it really? Let's say a male orgasm with ejaculation and no condom is a 10 on a pleasure scale of 1 to 10. Blair, in her book, suggests that sex with a condom is maybe a 7 or an 8 instead of a 10, right? So it's not that it's not pleasurable, it's just maybe potentially less pleasurable for some men.
A lot of where men and their partners go wrong here accidentally is not realizing that they need to use lube inside of the condom tube, not just on the outside. If you put a couple
Mm-hmm.
of drops of lube in the tip of the condom before you roll it on, it's going to feel much, much better. You're going to have great sensations that way. And of course, always put tons of lube on the outside for your partner's comfort as well. So
Mm-hmm.
if the condom sensation itself is too distracting for you, we recommend you practice masturbating while wearing a condom. It's going to help your body and your mind adjust to the change in sensation and make that a new norm for you so it's no longer interrupting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you also want to work on your relationship to the sensations in your own body. In your sexual self-practice, try masturbating while identifying what sensations you're feeling and where you're feeling those sensations. You can and should train your brain to notice sensations throughout your whole body during sexual activity.
Yes.
This is going to make all of your sex feel even more pleasurable with or without condoms, and it'll make you a more sensitive lover, both emotionally and physically. So it's win-win. It's wild to me how women's pleasure is still not the priority in the average American bedroom. Once mainstream porn finally reflects that shift, when we've fixed that, I will know that we've gotten somewhere. Because when women are sexually thriving and satisfied, we glow. Our relationships glow. Our lives glow. We give off such a great energy and a great feeling to everyone around us. And you know, when a lit up woman is absolutely ravaging her partner, like consensually. Every chance she gets, like you can just feel that. You're like, okay, she's thrilled. Her partner's going to be thrilled. Everyone she knows is going to be thrilled. It's just such a beautiful cycle. When our cups are filled, we continually pour out everywhere. It's beautiful. And this is one of the most beautiful things, one of the most wonderful things about sex too, is that no matter how many times a cis woman is able to orgasm and enjoy sex, she can't get herself pregnant.
That is right.
Her pleasure is safe. And the book that we had talked about on the last episode is by Gabrielle Blair called Ejaculate Responsibly, A Whole New Way to Think About Abortion. And as Blair says in her book, women enjoying sex does not cause unwanted pregnancies, but men enjoying sex and having irresponsible ejaculations does cause unwanted pregnancies.
Yes, it does. And if you are a man who doesn't want to use condoms, a vasectomy is a good option because it's safe, effective, and highly reversible. It's an in-out procedure that does not require a hospital stay, and recovery is typically only 2 or 3 days when you have to sit on the couch and watch TV with a bag of frozen peas on your junk, right? So it's not that bad.
A man that I was dating a couple of years ago said that was, I forget which birthday it was, but that was one of his birthday presents to himself, is he got a vasectomy, he got his favorite food on the way home. A couple days later, he was just like, this is what I want in life. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I heard from a urologist one time that the busiest time for vasectomies is like right when the March Madness is happening in basketball, because the guys can sit there, with their ice packs and watch all the games. So
that sounds like a fair trade. Go get the snip snip. You can watch what you want.
get it when there's something you want to watch on TV.
Vasectomies are far less risky than tubal ligation. I keep wanting to say litigation because like my
tubal ligation.
Tubal ligation. Tubals are harder to get, and women are routinely denied the surgery if they're under 35 or they don't have kids. In a committed couple, if you're choosing between a tubal and a vasectomy, the vasectomy is definitely the way to go. So much simpler and easier.
Yeah, and if you think you want to have kids, you probably don't want to get a vasectomy. I mean, it is highly reversible, so if you change your mind, you can. But if you don't want to get a vasectomy and you hate condoms, you're not willing to learn to love them, as Katie and I suggest, you actually do have one other option. Men can use the pull-out method, okay? I am not saying that this is the best form of birth control, mostly because pulling out can be difficult to do perfectly. And because of that imperfection, if you use withdrawal as a strategy for birth control, there's actually a 1 in 5 chance of pregnancy, which is really not great. However, the pull-out method, when done perfectly, is 96% effective. So that's not as good as the 99% you get from the pill, or the 98% you get from condoms, or the 99 to 100% you get from a vasectomy, but 96% is pretty damn good. So in my opinion, men should learn how to do this well.
It's better than nothing, and personally, I'd never recommend this method because it's way too risky for my comfort level, but I have several friends who've used this for years without any issues at all. It really just depends on how good the man's control over his own body is, and it takes a lot of self-awareness and practice to be able to do it properly.
Yes, absolutely. It takes self-awareness and practice, and we're going to get into talking about how to do that, right? One thing to note, and Katie, you brought up pre-cum, the idea of pre-cum in our part 1, right? And a lot of people worry about pre-cum with the pull-out method. But if you look at the statistics around it, sperm in pre-cum is almost a non-issue. It's not 0%, but it's an extremely low possibility. And I kind of think everybody was talking to that about us when we were younger, Katie, because it was just kind of a scare tactic to promote abstinence. That's what I think. But moving on, we can learn how to do the pull-out method really well. And one way to learn how to do that pull-out method really well is by not ejaculating at all when you have partnered sex.
Hello, non-ejaculatory orgasm.
Yep. So this is one thing that Blair doesn't really get into in her book. And I suppose it's a bit out of the scope of her book. She is just talking about ejaculating responsibly. But I really want to talk about the possibility of orgasm without ejaculation for men. So that's what we're going to do next.
So many of our listeners might be asking, is non-ejaculatory orgasm a real thing? I thought when someone with a penis orgasms, there's an ejaculation. So we're here to say, yes, this is a real thing. You can have an orgasm without ejaculating. Not only can you have multiple orgasms in a single session using this method, but you can also do it without ejaculating, with no recovery period, and you can have prolonged orgasms that last for over a minute.
It is so real, Caity. And one other beauty that I don't think you got in that list of all of the beauties of non-ejaculatory orgasm, you can have sex as many times as you want, right? Oh, I guess you said recovery period, right? So most men are going to ejaculate and they're going to, depending on their age and a lot of other factors, need a certain amount of time. It's called a refractory period, right? So typically the older a man gets, the longer a refractory period he needs. Well, that refractory period is possibly eliminated with these non-ejaculatory orgasms. And there's other factors, but it really is a beautiful thing.
Powerful. So if you have a penis, you're probably thinking, hot damn, how do I do that? And you learn this by training for sex.
Yes. So I wrote a whole article on training for sex, and we will put the link in the show notes for that. It's called Training for Sex, Why It's Important and How to Get Started. So I would encourage you to go to that article if this piques your interest.
Yes. And for our penis owning listeners, we also have our Stamina 101 challenge, which is a great way to get started in sexual training. We also have, of this podcast, season 1, episode 4, that talks all about the best stamina builder that money cannot buy, and that's edging.
Yes. Yeah. And I have a Gateway to Sexual Mastery program for men, right? And I have all of my Gateway students do Stamina 101 first before they get started working with me. And regardless of whether they think they need to build their stamina or not, it's such a great free program. And it is a great way to begin to understand your relationship with your own orgasm and what shifts you might need to make personally.
And again, it's free. It's 5 days of really essential practices to set a really solid foundation for doing this work. And once you get through Stamina 101, it's going to be a lot more clear about how to proceed and how working with someone like Angela can help you develop your own customized sexual training program to help you advance even further.
Yeah. And, it's all about practice and practicing with the right instructions, right? So I would encourage anyone listening to get that guidance, whether it's from me or Caity or anyone else, but get the right guidance and be practicing weekly, right? You want to have your own sexual training program that you are doing at least once a week. And more often than once a week, if you actually want to improve. Once a week is kind of like keeping you on level, right? Once I have my clients on an appropriate sexual training program for them, then the next step is to help them learn to spread pleasure sensations throughout their body. And there are a variety of techniques that you can use to do this. You can use intention and visualization and breath and sound and movement, right? And all you need are the right instructions. You can be practicing this in your own sexual training and with partners.
And we're actually going to teach one of these techniques in our next episode. In our April's Quickie episode, we're going to be discussing full body orgasm for men and women to give you a taster of the technique so you can follow along with it and do it with us. See what it actually feels like.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. And I teach this full body O class, and I'm going to be doing it again in June, right? So if you like what you hear in April, definitely jump on that full body O class in June and take it a little further.
We should mention, though, that non-ejaculatory orgasms aren't for everybody. So what do people need to consider before they set out on this exercise?
Yeah, that's an important question, Caity. I'm really glad you asked it. So if you're not ejaculating like all the time, right? That's called semen retention, right? You're retaining your semen, you're holding on to your semen. And Caity, I think we might need a whole episode on semen retention because I might have a lot to say about it.
You
Yeah.
actually did talk about that before. That was that same season
Oh,
one,
good.
episode 4
Okay.
episode. I checked the script yesterday and was like,
Oh,
okay, we did dive into some of this here, but let's just go with some of the basic pointers for now as refreshers for our listeners.
excellent. Now that we've been doing the podcast for 4 years, I kind of even forget what I've said in other episodes, right? So here are a few pointers, right? If you're thinking about trying to retain your semen because you're learning to separate ejaculation from orgasm, it is important that you don't retain your semen all the time, or maybe even most of the time, unless you're healthy, you've stopped using porn, and you have other ways, like outside of sex and orgasm, to release any kind of pent up emotions, right? So those are the basics. You don't want to stop ejaculating if you're doing anything that's a negative to your overall health. Okay. So ejaculate is outflow, and outflow is something we need as just part of our biological health. And I also want to go on to say that there's nothing wrong with ejaculating. Sometimes people get really wrapped up in this practice of semen retention and they feel like ejaculating is wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. It's healthy. And you don't have to stop doing it. Maybe just don't do it in a woman's vagina if she's fertile and she doesn't want to have a baby.
Basic courtesy. You know what else is hilarious right here? We completely missed the opportunity to talk about oral sex as another option for avoiding pregnancy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just have sex that's not P and V sex and you're gold, right?
Spit or swallow, it's up to you. Either way, you were not getting knocked up. Knocking
Yep.
boots without knocking up.
That is right. Great advice, Caity. And that is good advice just in time for Steak and Blowjob Day on March 14th.
I'd like to receive one of each.
Yes. So, to wrap up today's episode for our listeners, I'll just say that number one, condoms are great. And you can learn strategies to make condoms feel better if you're worried about that. Number two, vasectomies are also a fantastic option for many men. Number three, pulling out is pretty great too in committed relationships where STIs are not an issue, but only if you do it well. And one way to do it well is to learn to separate ejaculation from orgasm. The wonderful side effect of that practice is the possibility of fantastic full body orgasms and multiple orgasms. So I'd be exploring that for sure if I had a penis. And also read this book, Ejaculate Responsibly by Gabrielle Blair.
And that's all for this episode of Quickies with Angela and Caity. Thank you for listening. Please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.
If you'd like more great information on sex, love, and relationships, be sure to follow us on social media too. I am AuthenticHeartCoach.com on the web and at AuthenticHeartCoaching on Instagram.
And you can find me on CaityCoaches.com as well as at CaityCoaches on Instagram.
All right. Well, last week I got to tell you all that my March and April workshops for couples are sold out. I do probably at this point still have room in my May retreat near Charlottesville, Virginia. I also have a Get Closer workshop in May on May 4th. That's for couples. Both of those are great, whether you have any Tantra experience or not. And I did hint earlier in this episode that in June, I'm going to do my full body O class. This is going to allow you to learn some techniques you can apply to have multiple orgasms if you're a woman or a man and work toward non-ejaculatory orgasm.
We also have a free passion and desire guide available for straight and bi men to give you our top 7 tips for unlocking your woman's primal side. It's linked in the show notes. And as always, we have our beloved Pussy Whispering on-demand masterclasses for women, for men, and for couples, because you don't need any more superficial hot moves to take your sex life to the next level. That's amateur stuff. What we bring is a completely fresh approach to the foundations of sex, rooted in what women's bodies need most. Learn more about that at pwclass.com or also linked in the show notes. And with that said, we'll see you next time on Quickies with Angela and Katie.